Well, we had a tough one last week. But we're going to get into easier territory today. A really good story, frankly, but with a twist, a healing with a twist. So let's just do this. We are in Mark chapter 7, starting verse 31. I'll read this week. We'll read the first one. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. Decapolis just means 10 cities, probably little villages that link together. There are some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. The hand on him was almost certainly a request to heal him, but it also could have been a blessing. Rabbis gave blessings. This man would have had to have been a beggar. He would not have been able to go into the temple. His life would have been miserable. So, after he took him aside, how did we close last week? Jesus didn't want to do the show. He gave people dignity. Took him aside, away from the crowd. Jesus put his fingers in the man's ear. Then he spit, hello, here, this is new. This is every 8-year-old boy, just ears perked up. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. And he looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, which means to be opened. And at this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. And once again, that no-show thing, Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. But the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. Now, that's verse 37 in the NIV, and I love the phrasing there. So NIV guys, you did great. They were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So, I want to talk about spit and touch and tongues. And people always ask, they'll say, wait, he healed the last lady's daughter at a distance, even if it was next door, is at a distance. And the Roman centurion's slave, and then the ruler of Jairus' daughter, he could do that at a distance. So why the touching? And here's where I put my shrink hat on. Used to be a shrink before I went on to neuroscience, and ran counseling things. And some people need more than healing. Some people need more than relief. They need a story. They need a ritual. We know this. I married my wife more than 44 years ago. I would have absolutely dearly loved that we could look at each other and said, you want to be married? And she'd say yes, and that was it. But we do a ceremony. Even if you're not religious and you go down justice of the peace or the county clerk, there's a form to fill out. And we call it a form to fill out, and we call these formalities. You need a ritual. For some of you that are in pain, that are having a hard time forgiving somebody, and especially if that somebody's dead and gone, and you have no ability to really make them own up to what they did, write a letter. Detailed. Don't do it today. Do it over a period of weeks because you're going to remember stuff. Come back, put it in there. You might need to bury that. You might need to say a prayer and burn it and take somewhere and scatter the ashes in a river. You might need a ritual. You and I are Christians. We both believe in Jesus as the Son of God. We can do that outside. We can do that on our own. But we need the ritual. So we gather together and we take the Lord's Supper. We have the prayers. So this is not a mystery. Some people need the confidence of ritual. Later on, when this man tells his story, what's he going to say? This great healer touched my ears and touched my tongue, and I could hear. Instead of having to say, I don't know, he was given a story. And I love that. For example, Naaman. How many times do you have to dip? 7. Why? Why? You could have said, here's some water, pour that on your head. No, needed more ritual. And I find it wonderful. There's an old hymn, he knows just what I need. Oh, yes, he knows just what I need. Yeah, some of us need the process, or process to you colonials. Some of us need the journey, and then we're there. In talk therapy and counseling with people, very, very often, the day they walked in, I knew what I could say to help them out. But I also knew it wouldn't satisfy them and it might not stick. So I had to lead them gently till they found it and they built a story that allowed them to be better. So here I just jumped in, read it, and talked all over it. But I'm talking from a shrink perspective. What do you see, or do you see anything I'm missing here, or theologically that you'd like to add?
Yeah, this as a miracle kind of stands. It kind of stands apart from the norm because
Yep.
when you're trying to apply a story or make an inference or put it just doesn't fit. It's like this is what I do, and I go through it. The one thing that seems interesting to me is putting a finger in the ear, in the speaking. It appears to be, and what some writers think it is, was a kind of a sign language type thing going on here.
Okay.
Because putting in the ear when you talk to somebody can hear and they know
Yeah.
you can. There's certain kind of things and so there's some illusion that may have been going on.
That makes
there.
sense. It does.
They're with it because it would make sense because he's around other people, others, but not necessarily here, but he's around other people, knows what's going on, and so Jesus is translating this message to him. That just like I'm talking to you and you can hear me now. If I say, okay, I'm getting ready to heal you, then you hear it and say, oh, thank God. Okay, he can't hear, and so he's doing this. And then no, I'm getting ready to take care of this situation. So the anticipation builds in him, builds in him that God is doing something. It's, I guess a way to put it is when God does these miracles, it's like he's breaking into the fabric of time and
True.
pulling it apart and then promoting his reign. Like, God's reign is always over and above everything else. It's like he's pulling back the fabric of time to do this. But it also lets us know that the time, and the reign of God is very much different, from just what we move in, because God doesn't look like he's ripping apart the fabric of time. To him, it's not that. To
Right.
us, it is from our perspective. But to him, it's God doing what God does in the world that he created. So he does it, but for us to understand it, we have to put an anthropomorphism. We got to put something on it to help us identify what we're talking to. And I think that may be some of what's going on here. And if so, it always lets us know the compassion, just like in the story we finished on last week, the compassion that was shown by the woman, letting herself be referred to as little, but even the little dog, and hear what God is doing to let him know that is the God that we serve. And when people are hurting, when a person is hurting, when a person is beat up on or they've been pushed around, and I'm not talking about being pushed physically, but that may be a part of it, but mentally or socially or relationally, when they've been pushed, that God is feeling these things, that he's internalizing it. And so this God at a distance that just does these miracles and kind of keeps the universe from flying off the hinges and all of that, that's for the scientists to discuss when they want to do what they want to do. But the God that put all this together is still very personable.
He's still involved.
And he's walking close enough to think and to feel enough, or to feel into this situation and know what this man is experiencing, especially as he's doing these things with the spittle. Now, of course, there's the concept that spittle had medicinal properties at the time. So there's all that stuff that we have to give some kind of credence and understanding to, but we're just dealing with the text here. That's the compassion of God. So when you're hurting and stuff like that, never feel that God has put you at the end of the line and he put you back there because you were bad, and he put you back there because this mess you in, you went out of your way to get into this stuff here. That's not how he works. It just isn't. But sometimes it's hard to feel that compassion because when we get mad at others, sometimes we get mad at ourselves and we let it play out. And so that, that compassion, bringing ourselves down a little bit to be able to give God the glory and allow God the space to do what He do, and then allow us to start thinking about, ourselves, would help us to be the kind of relational people that God is building Christians into. Not a legalistic person, but a relational one, because then you can hear their pain.
And Jesus is very hands-on, even with lepers. And by the way, if you think this one's strange, he makes mud pies for somebody's eyes with spit later. And the medicinal prophecy, if you don't know this, again, back in the day, they had no concept of medicine. Galen was one of the earliest to try to codify a medical text. Is there medicinal purposes? No, but there are societal blessings. If you don't let your kids ever get dirty, you've set them up for an immune system failure. Whenever they're getting dirty in the playground and they drop a cookie and pick it up and eat it, you'll go, ooh, those are practice germs. They need those germs. Now, the great late and rather foul-mouthed George Carlin did a whole bit on practice germs. And working in immunology for so long, they need that. Couples that are married tend to be healthier than people that are single. One of the reasons is the kissing, the touching. They're sharing germs. Their immune systems keep working. But again, is there medical danger to spitting in somebody's mouth? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of danger there, too, because spit is a blood product, although it's hard for people to understand that. It is. Just go with it. But again, that's what they had. And he might have been just showing him that. And the way he'll later make little mud pies with spit and dirt and put on a guy's eyes. And on that healing, he had to do it twice. Because first time the guy says, I see people, but they look like trees. And I've had people go, what? Why? Why didn't? Well, first of all, it shows you the guy wasn't always blind because he knew what trees looked like. So second, I think he needed more story, but also healing your eyes doesn't mean he's healed your optic receptors in your brain. So now he finishes that. It's kind of like when you put in cochlear implants. You're not hearing anymore. It's picking up vibrations, and now we got to translate it so you can really understand. Jesus is using a process, but he's hands-on. But we have to get to a story you and I were talking about in private before we even started, and that is chapter 8, the feeding of the 4,000. Now, we've come from Syrophoenician. Peter's actually not trying to build to a crescendo here. Peter's book, Mark, is more episodic than the others. Luke, he tries to be and he is a successful historian. John's got a theology he needs you to see, and so he brings in all new stuff. Matthew wants you to realize Jesus is the king. He's the new Moses. He's the new Elijah. Mark, these are just stories told from Peter. And so if you're looking for a common thread, there are some, but Peter being Peter, it's not quite as organized as the other ones. That said, I'm talking, hit chapter 8 please. Okay. Would you read that story 1 through 13, I think?
Okay. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. Then the disciples answered him, how can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? He asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away, immediately got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region Dalmuthea.
Yeah. Well, there's some cool things here. First of all, Jesus has compassion on their hunger. Well, now, let me back up. A lot of people will say, well, wait, we just heard this story in the feeding of the 5,000. It is true that in the Bible, stories can be told more than once, and they can be told with variations. I don't think this is happening here. This looks to be a different lesson. It is not unusual that Jesus will face more than one time a large crowd who have no food. They've come to hear him, and now he's concerned about this. It's reasonable to say this happened a lot of times. Well, his disciples in verse 4 going, where are you going to get the bread? Just makes us lean back and go, what? Weren't you there earlier? And in fact, he doesn't say that they have to go out and find it, but the little boy that had the one lunch. Mm-hmm. This is something which really leaps from the page to me. He goes, how much food do you have? They say 7. Now, here's what leaps off the page. The word 7 probably meant 7 here, but it was very common in Hebrew and Aramaic, still is, to use numbers as symbols. It's almost like they said, well, we got enough. I don't think that's what they're saying, but they don't know what they're saying. I think that's the little Semitic play. You know, how can we feed them? What do you have? 7, but it can also be translated, we have enough. And he's just going, well, sit them down and feed them. And then they did, and by the way, they got the, how many baskets full this time? 7. They got enough. When I ask God for things, he very often does not give me what I want. But when I look back on it, he gave me enough. He gave me 7. You know, my wife and I thought we would like to have more children. But biology required us to have 2, and that's all. Now, we don't feel cheated, but every now and then we do think about what our life would have been. But then we look and we see our 2 grown children, and we see our 5 grands, and we go, that was 7. That's enough. You know, our Christmases are busy enough. You know, our sports schedules are busy enough. But, and again, in my life, I have stomped around a lot saying, I don't have enough to do what God wants me to do, and he's not giving me enough. And therefore, I used to read this and think, those stupid disciples, those stupid apostles. Now I read it and say, Patrick, this is you. That you always say you don't have enough, that you aren't getting enough, and yet you've got enough. So that's my confession to you, Rick. And you're not my confessor, so I don't expect you to make a sign of the cross or anything. But tell me how you look at this.
The theme that's running through it, we've heard it with the previous story of feeding, and of course, when you start studying something and you're looking back at the other gospels and what they have, you have to be able to keep everything straight, because it looks like you're reading things numerous times when you're not doing it. So you have to be able to do that. But the storyline underneath this is that why are they I know they've been with us, 3 days. We know that they came out. His disciples answered him, verse 4, how can we satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? And it's almost as if in verse number 5, he asked them, how many loaves that you have? 7. He's thinking, okay, guys, we've been through this before. Okay, we've been through this exact thing before. And can you imagine if this actually they were reading a text of scripture? As a matter of fact, we were there last chapter.
That's right.
We were just in this. And it's a thing that, and the picture the thought that we take from it today is that God is bringing them along, is what he's doing. He's bringing them along, he realizes they haven't seen what he's doing, that before. They have nothing. We have the Bible, and then we have other people around us that tell us things.
Yeah.
It's not like they had, and the stories they did have with them were not this story. Matter of fact, they were fighting this story, and so there's a lot going on in the head. But what he's saying is, did you forget to depend on me? Now that is critically important because we can forget what Jesus did for us in a heartbeat and a flash of light.
Absolutely.
And we're praying for it. And Jesus, can you imagine Jesus and him put his hands on it? God, we just dealt with it. I'm going to be here. Come on, let's get it. But see, that's what, Patrick, that's what sin does, is it messes with our memory.
That's well. Write that down, people. Put that on a T-shirt. Yeah.
It messes and it tends to drain it, so that when we start hurting, we have a tendency to forget the healing that happened in this other situation, or the journey of that situation, or how it came to pass. I like to interject this thought, and you can grind, just kind of chew it up too. Part of this thing of baptism, as we carry it out in water, part of that was so that when Satan gets to shaking our cage and rattling us, and we start questioning our faith, and we start questioning God, we don't just have an internal thing to look at and say, I came to Jesus. I've acknowledged him as my Savior. We don't, because we all know that we're sinners. Now, we may try to fool other folk and tell them, I used to sin a long time ago, or I did one day 5 years ago, but I'm
right.
See, we do that, but we all know who we are. And but the physical part of the physical part of it was regardless of what happens, your brain can always go back. I know I went down in that water of faith, and I know I came up. So when we're rattling, we're not, if I can say this right, we're not looking just to that internal thing,
Right.
because we know the day we accepted Jesus, as humble as we were and as sorry as we were, and the tears that we shed, we know even in that day there were some thoughts we had, there's some things that happened that transpired. But you have that. So when Satan is rattling your cage and stuff like that, you can ready to go back. I know I accepted God, as I said. I'm not saying because the water did anything
But
particular.
it's a ritual.
Yeah,
It's a ritual.
It's a ritual.
That's right.
And I need that, because there's sometimes when I look inside of me, I said, I didn't do good here. I don't, and Satan, and literally what Satan is trying to do is detach us from God. That's why he does it. Like, he's trying to detach us, from God. And so part of this thing is, I know, and we pray about it. And then if we get on, we work through it. We feel bad. We correct what we can. We do all those things, but we go on. And so we ought to thank God, for the process, not unduly push on it what's not there, but acknowledge the fact that, because sometimes when you look at yourself, there's not enough good that you can say, I know God is in me because I did, I don't,
The ritual helps, and I find, I don't know if it's sin that makes me blind, as it is the normality, the banality of normal life that does. So I will catch myself praying that God will bless me in a house that has temperature climate control, comfortable seating, multiple televisions. I have a pretty wife, 2 healthy grown children, 5 healthy grandchildren, a church, Our Safe Harbor, which is just amazing, friends like you, and they are saying, oh Lord, please bless me. I'm blind to my 7. I'm blind to my enough. Recently, some things going on with my mother, some things going on as we age, I realized I really need to start downsizing. And I have found a certain freedom in letting loose of a lot of things. And it has also helped shape my prayers a little bit, because I'm not asking for the same kind of blessings to fill up my closets and my garage. Now I'm asking that God bless this person, but I still will catch myself saying, I'm out here, buddy, and I need blessings. And God can lean right over and say, you've had 2,000 years to read Mark chapter 8. You have 7. You have enough.
Yeah, the heat we feel on our neck, on our back, of the pressure of sin. And I'm not talking just personal sin that a person goes through, but I'm talking about in a world
War.
that has given the sin, the pressure that we feel. It in a sense is like a sunburn that you can feel, and we instantly start responding, to, Lord, bless this with that, and then bless me. And just as you said, I got all this stuff, and then the thoughts come to our head, the people I just watched on television, or the ones I know. We've had some members of Safe Harbor that they did a missionary trip, and you go and see what people are dealing with. But God does not want you to look at it like that. You can't, because you were born in whatever country you're born into, and you're born into stuff you have around you. And that's what your normal is based on. But then when you start visiting, you start seeing, you start hearing, you let God open you up. And God is saying, now don't turn away from this. Don't turn away from this. If you see that this needs to be clean water, then what do you do to make clean water? If you see this to be, you know what, there's a different kind of irrigation that you can do that does not require a lot of water, but it does this, and it's simple to do. Okay, so how do we do that? Instead of asking, why don't they have this? We have it. I have it. And a lot of people have what they have because of what their parents or great grandparents did. They're just living in the sun of that blessing.
Yeah, they were born on third base and thought they hit a triple.
Yes, exactly. And that's where God is doing His work in the people in the world. We come together as a group, but when you come together and we communicate like that, that's more like the rally. That's more like the rally the players do in the locker room on the field to get ready to go out and do what they need to do, or what the soldiers, when some important person comes in, and just, okay, we're going out to do this, or what the CEO does. And you can see it very good when they televise those corporate meetings, especially of media groups. The corporate person says this, and the light shines on them like they're God, and they've got all these acolytes out there that say, we're going to change the world with this new phone. We're going to do that. I thought you were going to change it with the last phone, and I'm tired of paying for these phones.
That's right.
So why can't, because what God is doing is saying, that's what I want you to do in the world. I want you to go forward. That's how we change the world. But unfortunately, we lock up what God is trying to do with us, the feeding of the people. We lock it up inside of our little thing.
Exactly.
And don't do that, instead of letting it go where God needs it to go with the right spirit. They may not have this, but they weren't born with it. They may they're in a country that doesn't have that, but that's that country. That's the way it developed. You can't go undo that. But when God arouses that in you or brings you to it, you can say, okay, what do we need to do here?
For example, in our safe harbor, and I'm going to only do a few, and there are quite a few, but I'm only going to mention a few. We recently had one of our members go to Nepal to work with Flint Global to help people become self-sufficient, find out what the market is there, help them develop a business, help them learn how to sell, buy, give to the community, and then become self-sufficient so that they could get out of poverty. We have a teenager up in New Jersey who, because she loves and is kind and has a great heart, she has reached out to the veterans there, and she collects new clothing, new hygiene products, new things for the homeless veteran shelter and another veteran shelter. And she says when she has any left over, she takes it to the VFW. Teenager, she didn't need to, but she looked at her life and said, oh, I'm the one holding 7 loaves. So she's, instead of saying, and I could say like most teenagers, but frankly, most people, more, she's saying, I have 7, I have enough. Well, we have in Indiana, people found out, and I had no idea this, that there is like an epidemic all over of kids that don't have their own bed. And this little church in southern Indiana, connected to our safe harbor by membership, shared membership, has built over 200 beds for kids in farm country and just presented them with beautiful handmade beds that they can use the rest of their life. They're not kiddie beds. I can keep going, but my point is, whenever you stop long enough to realize you've got 7, then you can start digging wells for clean water. Then you can go help somebody work their way out of debt so that they're free. And they can do, as Scripture says, work with your hands so that you can give to those who don't. I fear, and I don't want to get into politics because we don't do that at our Safe Harbor, but I fear that far too often we assume we can just vote somebody else to do that. And that's what the apostles, where can we get that? Who can we get to do this for us? And Jesus goes, no, you have enough. Share what you have. That's just, it's a great, great story, is it not?
Yeah. And you mentioned about the basket, that 7 comes up again with what was left over. And of course, it makes a whole lot more sense now when you attach it not to 7 exactly.
Yeah.
But as he talks about the 7 large baskets, which doesn't show up in the other feeding. It was 12 baskets, whatever, but it doesn't say anything about the size of them. Okay, and that word here for large is talking about a size of a basket that a person can hide in. A physical person can hide in. So these are some huge baskets
that's a few
that we're
bushels.
talking.
Yeah.
And so there's a different thing going on with how much food came into the. I'm trying to get. I know some of you are watching, some of you are listening, so I'm trying to talk it and demonstrate the food that came into the miracle, the food that was dispersed in the midst of the miracle happening, and then the food that came out of the miracle on the other side. This, and it's as if God is saying, okay, this is what started this off. This is what happened when it met the power, of God, the power of Jesus. This is what happened. And after it, he made sure that there was something for the problem when it came up, or for the people who weren't here that are in this problem that are not here. And that's a way to look at life, this thing that we're going through and what he wants to do with others, because that's critical. That love of God came because the disorder of people. Things that fell apart, the Tower of Babel, if you go back, even back that far, everything that starts radiating after that is pointing to what the Spirit is going to do, after that, coming out. And so this is critical to look at it not just as a thing of we have a powerful God and, he can stand in opposition to nature and what's going on to do that. That's probably the least and the less of it. But it's what the miracle does.
Exactly.
And so and in turn today is what will God do through you? Because remember that miracle went through those people and it came out the other side. So what is this doing? And everybody, as we say, everybody is not at the same place. God has different things he's putting on your mind that you're able to do different things, but it all goes in the same direction with God's stamp.
Amen. And I think that's where we should end it today. Thank you for being with us. Next week, we're not going to look at a miracle first. We're going to look at a warning, and then we're going to look at a miracle. So hang in there with us. Thank you. Subscribe, like, share these things, and send in emails. Talk about what you're learning, what you're thinking, and we'll go from there. All right? God bless. We'll see you guys next week.